All right, good morning. Oops. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday. It's actually Monday. It's Tuesday in disguise of Monday or Monday in disguise of Tuesday. I don't know. But welcome to Tuesday. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I see Jesse is here, so good morning to you, Jesse. And Adon is here. Good morning to you, sir. Yeah, let's go back to where we were. So, on Thursday? Thursday.
Wasn't that the quiz day?
Friday was a quiz day,
Oh.
I think. Wasn't it? Yeah. Friday was quiz day. So on Thursday, of course, we were still talking about sex and gender, right? And I don't think I have that slide, but maybe I'll just review it off the top of my head. So we started off talking about sexism. We did a little exercise with an alien trying to come up with rules for how to teach it to be a boy or how to teach it to be a girl, right? And so, again, the whole point of that was to sort of pay attention to some of the things that our society requires of our gender. But I don't have them on the screen here, unfortunately, but maybe just think back to what we were talking about and think about how many of those rules or ways of being for boys or for girls are connected to biology, right? And most of them, I think, we could probably agree are not, right? They are things that our society teaches us that we should be, right? And certainly there's a difference between the sexes, right? Men and women are not, we're not identical by any means. We are different, right? But a lot of what our society says a man should be and says a woman should be is not necessarily biologically determined. We are socialized that way, right? We are taught to behave a certain way. And that can get kind of confusing sometimes because if you remember back to that little graphic I showed you with the little gingerbread person or genderbread person or whatever they called it.
That one.
That one, yeah. If you think back to that, it can be a little confusing because what we started off with was the idea that sex and gender are kind of different things, right? Sex has to do with someone's biological body, but gender has to do with how they identify inside, right? And again, for most of us, I think we have a good morning. Most of us have kind of an innate idea of whether we're a man or a woman, right? We just kind of know that to be the case. And again, most people do have this kind of feeling, right? They kind of know what they are, they know where they fit. But the tricky part comes in that some people's gender identity isn't in alignment with their physical body, right? So they have a physical body of a man, and yet their gender identity, that doesn't feel right for them. They feel like they're a woman, right? Which is kind of an interesting intersection, right? And again, this is something that, I can't speak for your cultures, but in Western culture, we're just kind of starting to talk about this idea, right? That gender and sex are different, and some people have a gender that's different than their physical body, right? And again, it's connected to that idea of identity, right? And sexual orientation is who you desire, right? Who you desire as a sexual partner. But sexual identity is who you kind of present yourself to the world as, right? And so, depending on your society, if your society is very open and very accepting, then you can present yourself as a straight person, or as a gay person, or a lesbian person, or a pansexual person, or whatever, right? But in more kind of conservative, restrictive societies, you may not be able to do that. But those people are still there, right? They're just kind of hiding, right? They're presenting society with a different identity than they actually are. And so here in the West, again, we're just kind of starting to hear about people whose gender identity does not align with their physical body. And again, it wasn't really safe to talk about this in the past. And to be honest, probably one of the people who really got Western society talking about this was Caitlyn Jenner. Do you know who Caitlyn Jenner is?
Oh, used to be Bruce Jenner. Right?
Used to be Bruce Jenner, right? And Bruce Jenner is
father of the Kylie and Kendall Jenner.
Yeah, so he's the father of Kylie and Kendall Jenner. He's the now ex-husband of Kris Jenner from Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Um, so Bruce, interestingly enough, Bruce was an Olympic athlete in the 70s. I think he did decathlon, so that's like 10 sports. I don't even know what the 10 sports are. Pretty impressive. But he was an Olympic medal winner. He was very popular. He was on cereal boxes and things like that. But interestingly, all that time, he didn't feel like he was necessarily a man. He didn't feel like that was his gender identity. But of course, in the 1970s and 80s, it wasn't safe to talk about that, and so he didn't. Right? Nobody knew until, oh gosh, it's probably 10 years ago now. But maybe around the 2010s where Bruce finally said, this is who I am, right? I'm not who you think I am. I've been presenting myself as a man all these years, but that's not how I feel. And so Bruce kind of transitioned and started to live his life as a woman. And so took a new name, so goes by Caitlyn Jenner now. New look, different hairstyle, probably some plastic surgery because, they've got money. That Kardashian family got a little bit of plastic surgery to make him look more feminine.
I think it's not just a little bit surgery.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
it's a lot. I'm downplaying it a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot going on, and so now, so now Bruce kind of lives his life as Caitlyn, right? And so he's kind of living a life in alignment with her gender identity, right? And so because Bruce was kind of brave enough to kind of come out and talk about this and be interviewed about it, I think it kind of made a lot of space for other people to start to talk about it too. And so I don't really have any love for the Kardashians and all that stuff, but I will say that, I think Bruce was pretty brave in coming out and saying, hey, this is who I am, at a time when it probably wasn't that easy for him to do. But it got everybody talking. It got people used to the idea that some people's gender identity is not the same as their physical body. And more people were kind of encouraged to come forward, right? And so now this is a conversation that we're having, that people have different gender identities. Sometimes they're not sure, right? Especially if they're in their teen years. Sometimes, you're kind of growing, your body is changing. There's certain things that are kind of coming online, like your sexual drive and things like that. And sometimes it's not quite, young people might not have a clear idea of what the sort of concept of gender means to them or what it means for them, right? And so lots of people are kind of exploring this idea and kind of questioning what it means. And so that kind of brings us to where we are. Or what we're going to do today. So today I'd like to watch a documentary called The T Word. So the T Word is not treasure or trigonometry or it is transgender, right? So remember, we use those two terms, cisgender and transgender. Cis being your gender identity is in alignment with your physical body, right, Adel and Arid, right? Gender identity is in alignment with your physical body. Transgender is where it's not, right? You have a different gender identity than your physical body. So Laverne, does anyone know who Laverne Cox is?
No idea.
No? Laverne's an actress. She is a trans woman herself. Became quite famous on a show called Orange is the New Black. Anyone seen it?
Oh, I've heard of that.
Heard of it? Yeah. So Laverne became kind of quite famous in that show, and she's gone on to star in other things as well. But she's hosting this documentary, and she's going to kind of take us around the United States and introduce us to about six or seven transgender people. And so they'll talk a little bit about their experience and what their lives are like and who they think they are and how they know they are who they are and things like that. And it's pretty interesting to talk to some of these young people who are having this kind of very different experience probably than most of us. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Give me just 1 second here because I got to pop this into Microsoft Teams. So as usual, I'll have some questions for you to answer. I'll have some questions for you to answer, and I'm going to put them into Microsoft Teams. Let's see. Social justice team. This. Right. Okay, so I've put that into Microsoft Teams, and here are the questions that I will ask you. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about how socialization has played a role in the lives of these young people. How do these young people know their gender, and then maybe how do you know? How do you know that you're the gender that you are? How or why is language important when talking to and about transgender people? We'll meet one young man, Kai, and Kai is going to be asked a lot of questions about his gender identity rather than his athletic performance. Okay, so why is that, do you think? Why do some people not want to use pronouns that trans people ask them to? Why do you think some male students were uncomfortable with Ari's presence in the locker room? So you'll meet Ari and you'll understand that. Why is dating much more difficult for trans people, trans individuals? What is passing privilege? Why are trans people the victim of bullying, discrimination, and harassment? And why are trans women like Daniela, you'll meet Daniela, why are they so vulnerable? Okay? Sound good so far? Okay. So questions are in Microsoft Teams so that you can keep track of them and answer them. Let's see, we've got 20. Let's watch 25 minutes of this and then take a break, okay? So online people, you'll find the link in Microsoft Teams. We'll watch 25 minutes. I'm going to put this in the live chat here. Then break. Whoops. Okay. That'll be the plan. Okay. So, online people, we'll see you in just a little bit. Enjoy the first 25 minutes, and we'll be watching the same thing here in class, okay? random people in society, they start to treat this young person as the gender that they see, right? So that happens almost immediately, right? Almost immediately we identify a gender for a child, and society starts to educate them into how to be that, right? How to be a little boy, how to be a little girl, which is interesting because it's almost the same thing as our alien exercise, right? The child is like an alien, right? It shows up in this world. It has no idea how to behave as a gender. And so we start to teach it the rules, right? We start to teach it how to be a little boy or how to be a little girl. But of course, with these young people, we see that what they feel inside is not the same as what society is trying to tell them that they are, right? And how do they know what their gender is? And when? When and how?
They grew up and they realized that they prefer like so-called opposite gender, like how like the who's that, Zoe? Is it Zoe?
Zoe, yeah, the little girl in pink?
She was a boy, right? But she grew up and realized that she felt more like a girl and she liked girls' toys more, and so she started dressing like a girl and not like a boy.
Yeah, so she's
Feel strange about themselves. I mean, like, they think that they're not the one who grew up.
yeah, right?
They
Like
feel uncomfortable.
yeah, and they just kind of seem to know, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, again, Zoe was, Zoe's was a boy, right? Her sex assigned at birth was a boy. But pretty quickly, even as like a very young girl, she was like, no, I like this stuff, right? I like girl stuff, right? And she kind of she thought she was a girl, and she just said, "Oh, well, everyone's just mistaking me for a boy because they don't get it," right? And then she kind of figured out, "Oh, okay, this is why they're mistaking me because technically that's what I am, but I feel differently," right? And yeah, like these young people, very, at some point in their childhood, sometimes very early, they just kind of know,
Yeah.
right? They're just like, no, like, because I think if you've spent any time around little kids, once they get to, maybe 4 or 5 years of age, they definitely know what a girl is and what a boy is, right? They definitely know the difference. And so, young kids very quickly know kind of where they belong, right? They know that, no, I'm this, I'm not that, right? How do you all know? How do you know what your gender is?
I like girly things,
Uh-huh.
and I guess I guess I don't dress like a guy.
Right?
I dress like a girl. I used to like pink colors, like Barbie, but no, I'm more like just black, white, and plain colors.
Okay.
Still girly.
Okay, so some of the things that you like, or some of the things that you wear, right? Or
Interests and outside appearance.
yeah, okay. Good. How else do you know? How do you know what your gender is? Because I know too, right? How do I know?
What do you feel about yourself?
Yeah.
What you feel about yourself?
Yeah, the hobbies. I mean, like based on the hobbies or things that are separated. I mean, like are just marked for girl or boy.
Yeah.
So, like when somebody goes, like when a boy goes, like follow the, I don't know, toys, dolls for girl and are interested in.
Yeah.
Um, Not in all cases, but maybe he is like he can be. I mean, like depends on what you like and how do you comprehend your environment.
Yeah, there's
There are
kind
a
of
lot
a
of different various like reasons and various. It depends on the situation. You cannot predict like what is the exact key
yeah.
represent if you're transgender or not. So maybe
Yeah.
You know, in some parts, like maybe for example, a boy like pink, but he's what it is.
Yeah, like there's lots of little
There's no rules.
yeah, there's lots of little things.
It depends on that feeling. That feeling's actually for them. It is so obvious.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that you're looking for. I mean, like, just let me like try this one, and then I see like if I'm a transgender or not.
Yeah.
It is completely obvious, and you can, you know, like, those can understand what they are, but like we can maybe cannot like.
Yeah. It's tough to yeah, it's tough to sort of understand.
For us, but for them,
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, to summarize maybe what you said, Arad, was that it's almost like there's a certain kind of experience
yeah, there's a
that it's
special
like, yeah, that it's like to be a woman and that it's like to be a man, right? And we kind of, in society, we kind of know what those things are, right? We know what, what guys are supposed to be like, or what guys are kind of like, and we know what girls are kind of like, right? And we kind of know roughly which category we fit into, right? And again, we seem to know it very, very early on. And I suspect that all of us, came to know what gender we are probably before we even remember, right? Because it seems to happen for some people quite young. Some people don't quite figure it out. They're upset. They're not happy with their body or how they look or how they dress, and they can't quite figure it out. And then they're like, oh, okay, this is why I'm feeling the way I am, right? And so I guess we kind of compare, right? We look out into society, we see what kind of men are or boys are, we see what girls are, and then we kind of know where we fit, right? We know who we're most like.
You know, it's not something that we mentioned, like, for example, in a previous assignment that we have posted on Teams. That's, I mean, like, tell somebody who don't know what is girl and boy, explain how should he see girl and boy.
Yeah.
It's really hard because, nowadays all the adjectives are in common. I mean, are share with both genders, like male and female. You cannot say men are assertive. This
Uh,
is not true. So that's why I couldn't like do it, in a best way. So I didn't know like, so like I just imagine an adjective and especially this is for men, and then like I compare it for women, and
yeah.
I see that's nonsense. They both have they both cases have, and then I couldn't do it. So
Yeah, and that's definitely true, right? Things are, you can certainly have people who are, you know, who have characteristics that are sort of favored for men versus favored for women, right? There's always going to be, there's always going to be overlap, especially since, those two categories of gender, like we said, they're socially constructed, right? We kind of build what men are supposed to be, and we build what women are supposed to be, but not every man is like that expectation, right? And not every woman is like that expectation either, right? You can always find people who don't fit into the boxes because the boxes are imaginary, right? Why is language important when talking to and about transgender individuals? So they were talking about pronouns and things like that. Why is that important?
You can get offended.
Yeah, it can be offensive. Think about Kai when Kai was doing like a video call with his mom. Why was that so difficult for him?
because you remembered like his past,
Mm-hmm.
and then how difficult it was.
Okay, so there might be memories of the past. Okay. Why else might that call have been difficult for Kai when talking to his mom?
He feels that his mom doesn't really label him as a boy because his mom refers to his brother and sisters as son, my daughter, but when it comes to Kai, it's like, oh, this is Kai, not like, oh, this is my son. Like that's why he feels offended. That his mom hasn't 100% accepted who he truly is.
Yeah, right. So that not using those correct pronouns, and even it sounds like she took even 2 years just to call him Kai, right? I'm not sure what his name was before. But it took her, what's that? No? It took her 2 years just to call him that, and then she still can't seem to call him my son or him, right? And she can't. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Eunice, in saying that she doesn't accept him, right? She doesn't see him as he is. She sees him as someone else, or she sees him as who he was, or sees him as who she wants him to be, right? And that can be pretty painful, right? To not have a parent see you, right? And kind of accept you that way. And for him it's kind of it's very clearly in his face because he can't because his mom has trouble calling him that name, and his mom has trouble saying my son, right? And every time she doesn't say it, it's evidence that she doesn't accept him, that she thinks he's not right or not enough, right? And that's hurtful, right? And it still works the same for other people in society too, right? When you don't use the right pronouns, it shows that you're not accepting who that person is, right? I don't know if you remember, but the first day in class, when I was kind of going around getting people to introduce themselves, one of the questions I asked was, what do you want me to call you, right? Because sometimes the name that gets typed into my records here is not the name that people want me to use, right? And I want to accept you as you are, right? So you tell me what to call you and I will call you that, right? And so yeah, you can see how it could be very upsetting to not be seen that way, right? To not be acknowledged, right? Never mind, by other society members, but even by your own family, right? And you saw Kai, it was difficult for him, right? He said, I love my mom, but, after a certain amount of time, that's all he can deal with, right? Because it's painful, right? It's hurtful. They talked a little more about Kai, and they said that when Kai came out as a trans man, he was still playing sort of college basketball, I think. Yeah, college basketball, and got a lot of questions about his gender identity and his sexuality rather than athletics. And why is that, do you think? So one day they were asking Kai about passes and scores and the game, and the next thing they were asking Kai about what was in his pants, or did he have a crush on his teammates, all this kind of stuff. Why did the questions change?
You're curious.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, right? They're probably just simply curious about what the story is here and what's going on with Kai. I think that's probably part of it. Yeah. I think there might be more to it, but I think curiosity is a part of it for sure. Yeah. Why else? I'm giving you a hint there.
Resume.
Yeah, remember the resume study? Maybe you don't. Remember in the resume study, they mailed out resumes to want ads, and some of the resumes had stereotypically white-sounding names, and some of them had black-sounding names. And what happened when the bosses or the HR managers were reading over those resumes? Give you another hint.
Maybe because Kai was a guy of color.
Okay.
That's why the people were curious.
I guess it's possible, right? Kai is black, and it's possible that may have had an effect. I'm not sure how. but certainly his identity as a black person is always part of his experience and part of how people see him. What else do you think, though?
Maybe when he came out as like boy instead of girl,
Yeah.
it wasn't very talked about in the movie. It was still a topic that not many are open to talking about. So
Definitely. Definitely. I think it was something that a lot of people hadn't done or hadn't talked about yet. I think when I saw the article that they showed there, it was from 2010, and so again, that was, he was probably very early in revealing himself as a transgender person. So yeah, I think it was probably novel, right? It was probably not typical.
it was pretty new to a lot of people. That's probably why they wanted to know like Kai's experience, I guess.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair too. The other thing I want you to think about, and you don't have to agree with me on this, but like the resume study, we said that bosses and HR managers were kind of looking through a lens, right? So they were seeing those resumes with black sounding names. They were seeing them as through the lens of the stereotypes that they knew about black Americans, right? So here, I wonder if people started seeing Kai through a lens of a transgender person, right? So, the day before, or before Kai came out, they're just seeing, woman basketball player, right? Woman basketball player asking questions about the game, about the pass, about the score, and then all of a sudden, the next day, they know something different about Kai, right? Kai is a trans man, right? And suddenly they're looking at Kai through this different lens, right? And nothing has really changed, right? Still the same basketball player, same basketball game. The reporters or the press are there to ask about basketball. And yet, the questions change, right? Because they start to see him differently, right? They start to see him through the lens of being transgender, right? And Kai points out, why are they asking me about this? Nobody asks LeBron James about his penis, right? Because you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't ask him about that. You wouldn't ask him about who he has a crush on, right? Because you'd ask him about basketball. And Kai is saying, my gender or my sexuality has nothing to do with basketball. You should be asking me about basketball, right? But again, they suddenly see him through this new lens, and the questions start to change, right? And again, I think that that's happening, but I also think the other things are happening too, right? It's novel. People are curious. People want to know what the deal is with this, and to some degree, I think that's okay, but also, he's still a basketball player playing basketball, and in the interview after the game, he wants to be asked about the game, right? They don't, you don't go up to professional sports players and ask them about their genitalia or who they have a crush on, right? You just don't. Yeah, that's really strange, right? But suddenly, it seemed to be okay for Kai, right? Why number 6? Yeah. So Ari, some of the boys complained they didn't want Ari in the locker room. What were they saying?
They don't feel comfortable. The boys and they reported Ari to the principal, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think they didn't feel comfortable with Ari in the locker room?
Maybe because it felt like a female was changing in the men's locker room.
Right.
Felt a little off, I guess.
Okay. So they felt a little uncomfortable because were they accepting Ari's gender identity then?
No.
Not really, right? They knew that Ari was female, right? His sex assigned at birth was female. And so they were like, no, I don't want a woman in the locker room here. And they said, oh, he's watching us pee, right?
Oh,
Which
right.
which Ari says that's ridiculous. Nobody watches anybody pee, right? But what are they also kind of implying there about Ari's sexuality?
People think he's
Yeah, people obviously suspect that Ari might be sexually interested in men, but does that seem to be the case?
No.
Doesn't seem to be, right? He seemed to be very interested in Rachel coming over, right? His friend Rachel, and I think I don't think maybe they're more than friends, or maybe, Ari wishes they were more than friends, but I think Ari is not interested in men. I think Ari is interested in women, right? So in being in the locker room, he doesn't want to look at any other guys, right? He's
You
not.
don't see him as gay then.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, another guy staring at my pee while I pee and stuff.
But that's the thing. Ari wasn't doing that, right? Because Ari's not interested. So this is the tricky part about sexuality, is that we often, we have to sort of determine the person's gender first, right? So is Ari gay? Well, it depends, right? So it depends if you accept him as a woman or a man, right? If you say, I don't care how he dresses, he was born a woman, he's a woman, and now he's into other women, he's a lesbian, right?
He is.
Or whatever, right? So if you accept that, then Ari's a lesbian, right? But if you say, no, Ari's gender identity is male, he's living his life as a male, he is interested in women, he's straight, right? How you define his sexuality has to do with how you define his gender in the first place, right? And again, people, these boys at high school are making all kinds of assumptions and saying, oh, he was born as a girl, so now he's in the locker room with us guys looking at us while we pee. Right? And again, he's not, he's like, nobody watches anyone pee, that's weird, but also, he's not interested in those guys, right? He's living his life as a male, his gender identity is male, and he's interested in women, right? He's interested in Rachel. He doesn't want to look at his fellow guys in the locker room, right? So, again, those guys are kind of confused, right? They don't understand or accept his gender identity. They don't understand sexuality, right? Same thing happened to Zoe, right? Somebody one of the kids kind of hit her in the head and said, hey, gay boy, right? And I don't think that, again, it depends. If you accept Zoe as a young woman, which I do, if you accept Zoe as a young woman, then her sexuality gets defined from that, right? And I kind of get the feeling that she's kind of young, but I have a feeling she's interested in boys, right? So she's not gay, she's a straight woman, although she's a little on the young side still, but I expect that's what the case will be, right? So you kind of have to understand and accept people's gender before you can kind of understand and talk about sexuality. And I think that the boys in Ari's locker room, I don't think they get any of that, nor do they accept it, right? So they're just freaking out, even though, again, Ari's not watching them pee, he doesn't want to watch them pee.
So
And
overconfident.
yeah, and he's not interested in any of those guys, right? And again, it's interesting because we divide change rooms, locker rooms, according to gender, assuming that that's the same thing as sexuality, but it's not, right? Are there gay guys in the male locker room? If you go to change at the pool or the health club, are there gay guys in there? There are, right? There are gay guys in the locker room. Lucky them, I guess, right? Are there lesbians in the women's locker room? Yeah, there are. Lucky them, I guess. But that's the thing. We don't divide. We divide it by gender, thinking that it's the same thing as sexuality, but it's really not. Right? It's really not. And here it gets a little more complicated because we have people who they're transgender, right? And so again, the people in, you know, the guys in Ari's locker room, they don't really get that, right? They don't get transgender people. They don't get, or they don't accept the fact that Ari is a guy, right? It feels like he's a guy and is living his life as a guy, and they don't really understand the fact that he's not interested in you, right? He's not interested in looking at you when you're peeing or when you're not peeing, right? He's not into that, right? He likes girls, he likes Rachel, right? But again, those guys don't quite get how it works. Why is dating more difficult for, I'm going to ask you this question again tomorrow, but why is dating more difficult, do you think, for trans people?
They're afraid that that person won't accept them for who they are.
Yeah, right? And that's probably, would you say that that's a fear for all of us when we're dating?
Oh, I guess so.
We're afraid that the other person won't accept us as we are. So sometimes we kind of pretend to be a little different, or we pretend to be a slightly different version of ourselves, right?
Change ourselves to make people accept us if that happens.
Yeah, we change ourselves a little bit so people will accept us. We don't act as nerdy as we really are, right? Until later when they're invested, and then we can be as nerdy as we want. But yeah, so there's that, right? We all struggle with, you know, will this person accept who I really am? But for transgender people, it's even more so, right? Why is that a bigger deal?
Because they have, like Ari, he can't do that because someone freaked out, right?
Yeah.
When
Right.
you find out that it's different part.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
awkward to say the real word.
No, it's a little awkward, but yeah, right? So Ari says, yeah, his body is not entirely that of a male, right? And so he's taking testosterone, right? So he's taking, I don't know if it's pill form or injections, I'm not sure. But he's taking testosterone, so it lowers his voice, right? Gives him more body hair, right? A little bit of facial hair. Gives him, you know, a little bit more muscular figure, right? Makes him look more masculine. But again, you know, in his pants, he does not have male genitalia, right? And so if somebody reaches down there, they're not going to find what they expect to find, right? And, you know, that can cause some people to freak out a little bit, right? And he said, unfortunately, it must have been horrible, but
Someone has freaked out, right?
what's that?
Someone has freaked out.
Yeah, someone freaked out in the past, right? Which I can only imagine is a horrible experience. But that's a thing he has to deal with, right? He can present himself to society as a guy. He can be a guy. He can flirt with girls. He can go out on dates with girls. But there is a point where, you know, he's going to be different, right? And that's, you know, when things become intimate, that's where it's going to happen, right? Fortunately, though, not all people are concerned about that, right? We met Shane, and Shane's got a girlfriend, and what did Shane's girlfriend Jessica say about that? About the whole body difference thing?
I forgot that.
Forgot that part? I think she said, you know, because Shane was a little worried that when the clothes came off, he was a little worried that she was going to freak out, just like, you know, the same experience that Ari had, right? And Jessica, fortunately, was pretty good, and she's like, you know what? Whatever's down there, I've seen it before, right? You basically have two options for down there, and she's like, I know what both of those things are. So either way, you know, you're not going to shock me, right? And again, she's okay with that, right? She's, you know, that doesn't bother her, right? do you think it's okay for someone to reject someone for that reason? Do you think it's okay for someone to sort of not go out with Ari because of, what's in his pants?
I guess it's understandable.
Okay, how is it understandable?
Well, people like can have their own opinions on those issues, and if someone doesn't accept Ari for who he is, or like someone's still very conservative and straight, and like they don't like the LGBT stuff, then I guess their opinion should at least be understood.
Yeah.
And that one takes that way, because people can have different opinions, right? Like
Sure.
you don't have to be part of the LGBT, or like you don't have to support it, but just respect people for who they are.
Okay, so you don't have to support necessarily what's going on, but respect people, right? Edel, what do you think? Is it okay for people to kind of reject Ari based on his kind of physical body? No, why not?
Because it's not okay.
It's not okay?
No, it's just my opinion. Like, why should people reject someone because of their body?
True,
Yeah.
right? Why should someone reject someone else because of their body? Okay. Minati, what do you think?
I think they shouldn't judging over it. Everyone has bodies, so
Yeah.
can't just tell him that I'll not go out with you because you're not.
Okay. Arad, what do you think? Is it okay or not? I think he's asleep. He's asleep. Okay. I'm gonna disagree with you here and say that I think it is okay. And here's why. What Ari has in his pants, right? That has to do with your sexuality. That has to do with your sexual orientation, right? And so you might not be interested in that, right? That might not be part of your sexuality, right? For someone like Jessica, she's good either way, right? Doesn't bother her, she's fine, right? She's interested in Shane as he is, but not everyone is like that, right? And I think it's okay, right, in this case, because you're not talking about some sort of superficial physical characteristic like, oh, someone's nose is too big or whatever it is. This is kind of an important thing, right? And so whether your partner has a penis or has a vagina, that's an important thing. That's a big thing, right? And so I don't think freaking out is not freaking out is not a good response, but I think it's okay because again, it's part of your sexual orientation, right? So if you're a woman and you find out that Ari is a trans man but hasn't had any surgery down there, you may not be interested in that, right? You may, and that's okay, right? Because you don't really choose your sexual orientation and you don't really choose what you're into and what you're not into. And so I'm going to say it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not into that. Like
I somehow agree with you, yeah, because
yeah.
maybe they reject, someone rejects Ari because they're just simply not interested. Like some people have their own ideal type, right? And maybe
Yeah.
Ari isn't. So
And-
it's okay to reject. Just don't. It's okay to have
Yeah.
your own opinions.
Well, and it's okay, when you're dating someone, it's okay to be picky
Yeah.
too, right? You might not want to date someone who smokes, right? You might not want to date someone who swears too much.
Like an ideal type, right?
Yeah, well, maybe not even an ideal type, but I'm sure all of us have things that we just aren't into,
Yeah.
right? And this is an important thing. And so, I'm sure it would be hurtful for Ari for someone to reject him, or for Shane for someone to reject him, or some of the other girls that we're going to meet a little bit later. I'm sure that's painful. Nobody likes to be rejected
Yeah.
for any
ouch.
reason. Yeah, ouch, right? But I think that's a big enough thing to say, you know, if you're really not into it, then there's not much you can do about it,
I agree with you.
right? I mean, if a gay guy came up to me and said, "Oh, Mike, I think you're, you know, so handsome and so gorgeous. Will you go out with me?" You know, he might be a nice guy, but I'm gonna say no, right? I'm gonna reject him because,
Simply not interested.
yeah, like I'm not gay. So, like, I don't want to go out with him. He might be a very nice guy, might be very handsome, right? Might be very kind of kind and polite, and all that's great, and it's very flattering, right? But, like, I can't change what my sexuality is,
Agreed.
right? And so, yeah, I'm gonna reject that guy. Not, you know, I'm gonna be nice, but yeah, like, and there's nothing I can do about that. And so here I'm going to disagree with you guys, and I'm going to say I think it is okay to say, look, you know, I'm not into that. I'm sorry. You seem very nice, but
I
yeah,
agree with you.
yeah. But so again, you can say no, but you just have to be respectful and try not to hurt the other person, right? But that said, you know, they're probably going to be rejected a little more often, right? Because again, they are different in that way, right? They are different in that way. But again, maybe even, you know, maybe that's kind of maybe the takeaway there is to be even more gentle, right? Because yeah, like nobody likes to be rejected, and that's kind of a really personal thing to be rejected
Yeah.
on, right? So I think it's okay, but you just got to be
Big ouch if you get rejected.
big ouch, but just, you know, be nice, right? Be really nice, because it's not easy to put yourself out there, right? It's not easy to, you know, go on a date with someone or tell them you like them or any of that. But, you know, if it turns out that, you know, you're not interested, you have to be honest, but you have to be, you know, be nice about it too.
Be truthful.
Yeah, and again, you just can't change. You can't change what your sexuality is, right? There can be a, you know, very handsome, polite, you know, great gay guy in front of me, but
Just
sorry.
no, right?
Yeah, just like, yeah, what can I say? I'm not interested.
I agree with you.
You know, and
100%.
yeah. So, okay. So that's all the time we have for today. There we go. That's all the time we have for today. Pack it up. I'll try and get your quizzes back to you tomorrow. We'll finish watching this documentary and then we will carry on, okay? So have a nice afternoon. And I'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Alrighty, Roo. All right, see you guys online.